I remember the exact second the ground beneath my life gave way. It was a Thursday night in late October. The rain wasn't dramatic. It was that steady, whispering Pacific Northwest drizzle that makes everything feel slightly damp and melancholic. I stood in our kitchen, the one we had remodeled together during the summer of 2019, sanding cabinets until our hands were raw and laughing about paint swatches at midnight. The warm scent of roasted chicken with garlic and rosemary still lingered in the air, mixed with the faint metallic smell of rain slipping through the cracked window. Elena stood by the marble island, her phone lying face down beside her half-empty glass of Pinot Noir. Her dark chestnut hair was pulled into a loose, elegant knot, a few strands framing her face. She wore the soft gray sweater I had bought her for her last birthday, the one that made her eyes look deeper, almost stormy. "I'm heading out to that work thing tonight," she said, her voice light and carefully casual. "The team-building party at the new venue downtown. It might run late, so don't wait up." She stepped closer, placed her cool hand on my chest for a moment, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. Her lips were soft, familiar, carrying the faint trace of wine and her new citrus wood perfume. For one brief heartbeat, everything felt normal. We had been married for 12 years. We had two beautiful children, Sophie, 10, who already played violin with surprising passion, and Lucas, 7, who still believed dinosaurs could come back if we wished hard enough. We lived in a quiet, tree-lined suburb just outside Seattle where maple leaves turned brilliant crimson and gold every fall. I forced a small smile. "Okay, have fun. Text me if you need a ride home." Elena laughed softly, a sound that used to warm me but now felt slightly rehearsed. "I'll be fine. Love you." The front door clicked shut behind her with a gentle finality. I walked to the living room window and watched her red taillights dissolve into the wet darkness, the rain streaking down the glass like silent tears. The house suddenly felt too large, too quiet. Upstairs, the children were already asleep. Sophie with her stuffed fox tucked under her arm, Lucas sprawled across his bed like he'd fought a battle with sleep and lost. That night marked the beginning of the end. Because Elena wasn't going to any company party, she was stepping into a secret life that would slowly tear apart everything we had built. I didn't know it then, but I was about to become a reluctant detective in my own marriage, chasing shadows, questioning every memory, and slowly watching the woman I loved turn into someone I no longer recognized. And the worst part? The truth, when it finally came, would hurt far more than the lie itself. The seemingly ordinary moment of Elena's departure created the first significant crack in the foundation of our marriage. Her carefully casual tone, the slightly rehearsed laugh, and the quick, cool kiss were not isolated actions, but the visible tip of months of growing emotional distance. Small, repeated behaviors, increased phone privacy, shorter conversations, and a subtle shift in affection had been accumulating like sediment, slowly changing the atmosphere between us. My decision not to press her further that night, driven by a desire to preserve peace and avoid conflict, allowed the hidden motive to continue unchecked. This cause triggered a chain reaction. Her exit left me alone with my thoughts in a suddenly too quiet house, planting seeds of unease that would later bloom into hypervigilance and suspicion. Psychologically, my initial rationalization protected the stability of our family unit and my identity as a reliable husband and father, but it also delayed acknowledgement of the growing disconnect. The effect rippled outward, affecting how I perceived even innocent interactions in the following days. This section demonstrates how betrayal often begins not with a single explosive event, but through a series of micro-betrayals and unaddressed emotional drifts that gradually erode trust until one moment makes the fracture impossible to ignore. The power dynamic subtly shifted that night. Her autonomy in leaving without full transparency contrasted with my passive acceptance, highlighting unmet needs for emotional closeness that neither of us had openly confronted. The following week settled into a deceptive rhythm that felt almost normal on the surface, but carried an undercurrent of unease I couldn't quite name. Mornings began the same way they had for years. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen while Lucas chattered endlessly about his latest dinosaur facts, his small legs swinging under the table. Sophie practiced her violin scales upstairs, the clear, high notes cutting through the morning quiet like delicate glass. Elena moved efficiently between counter and fridge, packing lunches with practiced precision. Yet something had changed. Her smiles reached her mouth, but rarely touched her eyes. She kept her phone closer now, screen always angled away, notifications silenced. One Tuesday evening, I came home earlier than usual. The house was unusually still. I found Elena in our bedroom standing by the dresser, quickly closing the top drawer. A faint trace of her new, spicier perfume hung in the air, deeper and more sensual than the light floral scent she had worn for years. "You're home early," she said, turning with a slight start. A faint flush colored her cheeks. "Meeting got canceled. Is everything all right?" "Of course," she replied smoothly, brushing past me. Her shoulder grazed mine, the fabric of her blouse cool and soft. "Just sorting through some old clothes for donation. Spring cleaning in autumn, I guess." That same night, after the children were asleep, we sat on the couch watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. The blue glow from the television flickered across her face, highlighting the delicate lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. I reached for her hand. She let me hold it, but her fingers remained passive, almost distant. When I asked about the party from the previous week, she gave a vague description: loud music, forced icebreakers, someone spilling red wine on the carpet. "Nothing worth remembering," she added with a small laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Yet there were still moments that felt genuine. 3 days later, she surprised me with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. The sharp, fragrant smell of lemongrass and coconut milk filled the kitchen as we ate at the counter like old times. She asked detailed questions about my current project at work, tilting her head, a strand of hair falling across her forehead. For nearly an hour, the easy rhythm we once shared returned. Gentle teasing, shared glances, the comfort of long familiarity. But the first undeniable crack appeared on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I was doing laundry in the basement. The warm, soapy scent rose from the machine as I emptied the pockets of her black blazer, the one she had worn the night of the team-building party. My fingers brushed against a crumpled receipt, not from any downtown event venue. It was from a small, intimate Italian bistro on the east side of the city, known for its dim lighting, private booths, and romantic atmosphere. The date matched that Thursday night. 2 glasses of Chianti, 1 shared tiramisu. My stomach dropped. The dryer's low hum suddenly sounded deafening in my ears. The basement air felt colder. I smoothed the receipt carefully and slipped it back into the pocket, my heart beating heavily against my ribs. Maybe it was a work dinner. Maybe she went with a colleague. There had to be an explanation. That evening, Elena returned from what she called yoga class, her skin glowing, ponytail slightly damp from the rain. She kissed the top of my head where I sat pretending to read. "Missed you guys," she said softly. I smiled back, but inside, the questions had already begun to multiply like shadows at dusk. This section reveals the complex inner psychology of 2 people trapped between love and growing disconnection. Elena appears caught in a deep identity conflict, balancing her roles as wife, mother, and an individual craving validation and excitement that had slowly faded from our marriage. Her new perfume, guarded phone behavior, and vague stories suggest she was compartmentalizing her life, creating a secret emotional space where she could feel seen and desired again. This behavior likely stemmed from unmet needs for novelty and emotional intensity rather than outright rejection of our family. For me, the psychology centered on cognitive dissonance and fear. I loved the Elena I had known for 12 years, yet the accumulating discrepancies created painful tension. My mind desperately tried to protect our shared identity as a stable couple by rationalizing each small anomaly. The contrast between warm, familiar moments, Thai takeout, easy conversation, and cold doubts, the receipt, distant touch, created an emotional whiplash that left me anxious and hyperattentive to every gesture and scent. These early signs illustrate how betrayal often grows not from sudden hatred, but from quiet emotional drift and the human tendency to avoid painful confrontations until the weight of evidence becomes too heavy to ignore. The red herrings planted here, yoga class, work events, served to deepen my internal conflict, making every innocent explanation feel both plausible and suspicious. Suspicion didn't crash over me like a wave. It seeped in slowly, like fog rolling through the trees, until I could barely see the road ahead. Elena's schedule grew increasingly packed with late client dinners, emergency team meetings, and weekend brunch catch-ups with Sarah, a college friend I had never actually met. Her explanations were always smooth, delivered with just enough detail to sound believable. One rainy afternoon, while picking up the kids from school, Lucas kicked the back of my seat from the booster. Mom said she's going to a concert tonight with her friend. Can we get pizza instead? Concert. I kept my tone neutral, eyes fixed on the glistening wet road as the wipers moved rhythmically. Yeah, she was texting someone about it this morning. At home, the air felt heavier. The shared family calendar on the refrigerator showed nothing. Later that evening, Elena texted, "Running late again. Order whatever you guys want for dinner. Love you." Her messages had become shorter, more functional. The playful photos and silly memes we used to exchange had almost completely stopped. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat alone in the dim living room with only my laptop screen for light. The house smelled faintly of leftover pizza and vanilla from Sophie's scented candle. When I tried opening Elena's laptop, we had always shared passwords. It asked for a new one. She had changed it without telling me. My pulse quickened. Earlier that day, I had caught a notification flash across her phone while she was in the shower. "Can't wait for tomorrow, M." The sender showed only an initial. When I asked casually at breakfast the next morning who M was, Elena barely looked up from her oatmeal. "Oh, that's Mike from accounting. Just work stuff. Nothing interesting." But I noticed how her fingers tightened slightly around her spoon, a tiny, telling micro-movement. Then came the GPS anomaly. When my car was in the shop, I borrowed hers. The navigation history revealed repeated visits to a quiet residential neighborhood across town, nowhere near her office or any known client location. One Sunday afternoon, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread, I drove there. Golden autumn light filtered through the tall trees as leaves crunched beneath my tires. I parked discreetly and waited. Nothing obvious happened. Just an ordinary street with ordinary houses. Was I becoming paranoid? The thought haunted me. Elena seemed more affectionate at times, initiating intimacy one night with surprising hunger and new intensity. Her skin was warm, her movements more passionate, yet afterward, as she turned away to sleep, the emotional distance felt even wider, the silence between us heavier. A neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, mentioned in passing while we stood by the fence surrounded by the heavy scent of her gardenias. "I saw Elena's car near the park last week. She was laughing with a tall man. Looked like a good friend." Every clue had a possible innocent explanation. Every lead dissolved into plausible doubt. Yet the weight of these small mysteries pressed harder on my chest with each passing day. One sleepless night, I lay beside Elena in our cool bedroom, listening to her steady breathing while staring at the shifting shadows on the ceiling. The woman I had loved for over a decade now felt like a beautiful stranger sleeping next to me. In this phase, both characters demonstrate powerful cognitive biases that distort reality. I fell into confirmation bias and motivated reasoning, desperately searching for innocent explanations for every suspicious detail to protect the comforting narrative of our stable marriage. Elena likely constructed self-justifying stories that framed her secret meetings as harmless emotional support or necessary escapes from stress. The abundance of red herrings, Mike from accounting, professional connections, plausible schedules, made it easy for my mind to default to the path of least emotional resistance. This self-deception protected me from the terror of family disruption, but also prevented timely confrontation. The contrast between past emotional intimacy and the current emotional starvation became painfully clear, yet I continued to minimize the growing gap. These biases created increasing psychological pressure, turning ordinary daily life into a minefield of doubt and hypervigilance. The hunt for truth turned into a quiet, exhausting obsession that consumed my every spare moment. I told myself I was doing it for the children, for the family, for closure, but deep down I knew I was simply terrified of not knowing. I started small. One night at 2:17 a.m., while Elena slept soundly beside me, I carefully took her phone from the nightstand. The screen's cold blue light illuminated my guilty face in the darkness. With trembling fingers, I installed a discreet tracking app one had researched earlier. The guilt tasted bitter in my throat, but the fear of being lied to felt worse. The data began painting a disturbing picture. There were repeated stops at a small independent coffee shop in a quiet neighborhood across town, stays lasting 40 to 70 minutes, far longer than a simple caffeine run. Messages appeared and vanished within minutes. One night, I caught a flash on her locked screen before it went dark. Our spot tomorrow? Can't stop thinking about last weekend. Hey, not Mike. Another initial. Another layer of deception. I followed her one Saturday under the pretense of running errands. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. I kept a safe distance as her car wound through unfamiliar streets and finally parked near a charming little bookstore cafe with large windows and warm golden lighting inside. Through the glass, I saw her. She sat across from a tall man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and an easy, confident smile. They weren't touching, but their body language told a different story. Leaning toward each other, shared laughter, her hand briefly resting on his forearm. The way she looked at him was intimate, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The car suddenly felt suffocating. Nausea rose in my throat as I drove away before they could notice me. Still, it wasn't ironclad proof. My mind raced to create innocent explanations. Maybe he was a consultant. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe I was losing my mind. Financial threads added more confusion. Credit card statements showed hotel charges and expensive dinners, but one coincided with a conference she had attended with her team. Another large cash withdrawal appeared. When I casually asked about unusual expenses over dinner one evening, Elena didn't miss a beat. "I've been helping my sister with a surprise anniversary gift for Mom and Dad," she said smoothly, twirling pasta on her fork. I didn't want to spoil it. I checked with my sister-in-law the next day. She sounded slightly evasive, but confirmed something about a gift. Another red herring. Meanwhile, the children began showing subtle cracks. Sophie became quieter at school. Her teacher mentioned she seemed distracted. Lucas started clinging to me more during bedtime, his small warm body pressed against mine as I read stories. One evening, while helping Sophie with homework at the dining table under the soft glow of the pendant light, she said innocently, "Mom's new friend Alex makes her laugh a lot when she's on the phone in the car." Alex. The name landed like a stone in my stomach. Hey. A secondary twist emerged when I partially confided in my best friend Tom over beers at a quiet bar. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I saw her a few weeks ago with a guy. They looked close. I didn't want to get involved or cause problems." "I'm sorry, man." His loyalty had kept him silent, but now it only deepened my sense of isolation and betrayal. I eventually found a second phone hidden in the bottom of her gym bag while she was in the shower. Steam filled the bathroom, the mirror completely fogged. The phone was password protected, but a notification slipped through, a red heart emoji from A. Every lead seemed to twist. Background checks showed Alex Harlan was indeed a freelance consultant who had briefly worked with Elena's company, a legitimate professional connection that explained some meetings. Yet the frequency, the deleted messages, the emotional glow she carried home afterward didn't add up. The psychological pressure became almost unbearable. Nights were sleepless. I would lie in bed listening to Elena's steady breathing, her familiar scent now feeling both comforting and poisonous. Small affectionate gestures from her, making my favorite coffee, helping the kids with projects, began to feel like either genuine guilt or calculated manipulation. The web of secrets was tightening, and every thread seemed connected to the central betrayal. During the gathering of proof, powerful defense mechanisms were at work for both of us. I relied heavily on rationalization, telling myself that spying and following her were necessary to protect the family rather than acknowledging them as violations of trust. Denial helped me temporarily dismiss strong evidence by clinging to plausible explanations. Elena likely used compartmentalization, separating her secret life with Alex from her identity as a wife and mother, and possibly projection, attributing the growing distance in our marriage solely to my emotional unavailability. The red herrings and overlapping secrets, financial issues, professional connections, Tom's silence, gave both our minds material to avoid facing the full painful reality. These mechanisms bought time, but intensified the eventual emotional impact, turning daily life into a constant state of anxiety and hypervigilance. The accumulation of circumstantial evidence slowly weakened my defenses, pushing me closer to the unavoidable confrontation. The breaking point came on a cold, damp November evening. The children were at a sleepover, leaving the house unnaturally quiet. I had compiled everything: screenshots, location timelines, credit card records, photos taken from a distance, and the second phone. The Italian bistro receipt, the deleted messages, the bookstore cafe meeting, the name Alex, all of it. Elena came home around 9:15 p.m., cheeks flushed from the cold, carrying the scent of rain and her signature perfume. She hung her coat and offered a tired smile. "Long day. Where are the kids?" "They're at the Thompsons for the night." She sensed the shift in my voice immediately. "What's going on?" I didn't raise my voice. I simply laid the evidence on the coffee table under the warm lamplight and spoke with calm, devastating clarity. Every lie, every contradiction, every hidden meeting. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain tapping against the windows. Elena's face went pale, then her expression hardened into a mixture of shock and defensiveness. She sat down slowly on the couch, her hands folding tightly in her lap, fingers nervously twisting her wedding ring. "He's someone who listened to me," she finally said, her voice trembling. Work became overwhelming. The kids, the house, the routine. I felt invisible, David. You were always buried in your computer, in your projects. I needed to feel wanted again. Her words cut deep because they contained fragments of truth. She admitted the emotional connection had started months earlier, long conversations, shared vulnerabilities. The physical part began about 10 weeks ago. The team-building party, that first night, had actually been their first real evening together. Anger rose in me. "You looked me in the eye and lied." Repeatedly. The argument intensified, then dropped into painful, heavy silences. She accused me of emotional neglect. I pointed to her choices and the impact on our children. A double twist emerged in the raw conversation. Alex hadn't just been a lover. He had also known about the financial trouble she had hidden from me, a bad investment she made without telling me, and had helped her conceal it, creating a dangerous emotional financial alliance. She had used my close friendship with a female coworker 2 years ago, which was purely platonic, as subconscious justification for her own actions. "I never wanted to destroy us," she whispered finally, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I could keep it separate." By midnight, we were both exhausted, emotionally raw. No dramatic screaming match, just a hollow, devastating acknowledgement that the trust we had spent 12 years building lay shattered between us like broken glass. The confrontation was fueled by months of suppressed emotions finally breaking through. My fear, accumulated anger, grief, and desperate need for truth drove me to present the evidence with cold clarity. Elena's actions were driven by a complex mix of guilt, shame, defensiveness, and relief at being discovered. The fear of losing her family clashed with her need for personal validation. Triggers such as the empty house and the direct presentation of proof lowered emotional barriers, allowing raw truths and accusations to surface. Her micro-expressions, paling face, twisting ring, trembling voice, revealed the intense internal conflict between her love for our family and her search for something missing in herself. This climax showed how unaddressed emotional needs, feeling seen, desired, autonomous, can drive destructive actions when ignored for too long. The collision of all subplots made the moment feel inevitable and devastating. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. We told the children together in the living room one gray Sunday morning. Sophie cried quietly while Lucas asked if it was his fault. Their small, confused faces under the soft morning light broke something deep inside me. Elena moved into the guest room. Divorce proceedings began, slow, painful, and filled with difficult conversations about custody, assets, and schedules. She ended contact with Alex, claiming genuine regret and a desire to focus on co-parenting. Whether completely true or not, the foundation of our marriage had been irreparably damaged. The financial secrets fully surfaced during mediation, bringing painful honesty but also a strange sense of clarity. Tom apologized for staying silent, and our friendship grew stronger through the crisis. My mother became a steady support system, helping with the children during difficult weeks. I began therapy, slowly unpacking years of emotional patterns, my tendency to retreat into work, and the hypervigilance that had taken over my life. Small daily rituals helped me heal. Early morning runs in the cold air, the burn in my lungs matching the ache in my chest, quiet evenings reading to the kids, their warm heads resting against my shoulder, picking up photography again and capturing the changing seasons. Empowerment came quietly, in small moments. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried under routine and responsibility. One winter evening, standing alone in the backyard as soft snow began to fall, blanketing the grass in silence, I felt the first real sense of peace. The marriage chapter had ended, but life continued. Elena and I established respectful boundaries focused on the children. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed shape, becoming a teacher rather than a destroyer. I realized that trust can be broken in a single night of lies, but resilience is rebuilt day by day through honesty with oneself. For the first time in many years, my life began to feel truly my own again. Quieter, sometimes lonely, but authentic. Would I have noticed the warning signs earlier if I had been more present? Possibly. But hindsight is a harsh teacher. What matters now is moving forward with clearer eyes, teaching my children that real love requires effort, honesty, courage, and sometimes the painful grace to let go. Stepping back from the entire story, this narrative reveals a universal truth about human relationships. Betrayal is rarely the result of one dramatic moment, but the culmination of many small, unaddressed emotional drifts, unspoken needs, and self-deceptive narratives we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort. Trust is not automatic. It must be actively maintained through vulnerability, presence, and honest communication. When these erode, people often seek validation elsewhere rather than confront difficult truths within the relationship. The husband's journey from shock and denial to painful awareness and eventual empowerment shows how crisis can force personal growth. Elena's actions stemmed from deep unmet needs for feeling desired and autonomous, illustrating how even good people can make destructive choices when they feel emotionally invisible. The layered red herrings and intersecting secrets, financial lies, children's observations, misplaced loyalty, highlight how reality is rarely simple and how easily we can misinterpret or justify behavior. Ultimately, the story teaches that while pain and betrayal can shatter a marriage, they do not have to shatter a person. From devastation can emerge greater self-awareness, clearer boundaries, and the quiet strength to rebuild a more authentic life. Some chapters must end so that new, wiser ones can begin.